App Innovation, a solution assessment webinar here with Tallan. Quick agenda, start off with a little bit of just an introduction of who I am, and then we'll get into, what is the App Innovate? Why should you care? How is it being used? We'll go into some of the basics of what you get out of it, what the process is like for us, and then also what the deliverables are. And I'll go through some examples of where we've done this. Finally, open this up to Q&A if anyone has any questions. So my name is Ben Dewey. I'm our VP of Apps and Experiences here at Tallan. I focus on any of our custom application development, any new application envisionings if we're doing design of custom software, as well as any agile software development of custom both web applications as well as desktop applications. I'm also responsible for the main solution assessment that we're talking about today. So we're talking about our application innovation solution assessment, that as well as another one called our application modernization, are both solution assessments that I work very closely with in terms of our delivery teams. So if you don't know, the solution assessments, there's over 8 different solution assessments that are offered by Microsoft, and they really help customers at different parts of their journey to get to the cloud and get over to an Azure environment wherever you're trying to go. The one we're talking about today is an application innovation exercise, and it really is looking at how do we modernize up to 5 different applications into an Azure and primarily more of a platform as a service approach, where you're starting to take advantage of some of the scale up, scale down functionality, and the different kind of component nature that you can build out with your architecture in the cloud. So before we get into it, I like to just show this slide. It really talks about the value of platform as a service in general. It's an old slide, but I think it illustrates the point really well. If we're talking about the far left-hand side, the on-premises applications are really where most companies started out in terms of building servers in their own local data centers in their actual offices sometimes. They had to run all the switches, all the networking. They had to pay for the ISP service into their company, as well as actually running the physical machines and all of the servers and getting them patched and updated that they needed to get their applications to run and to be accessible for the people that need to use them. As you move over to the next section, that's really infrastructure as a service, and this came out when we really started to have the need to take away some of that responsibility. So you see here on the bottom, the pieces that are managed by the vendor is all that networking aspects, the loading up of the switches, having the internet, having it hosted, having all of the access that it needed to other services and to the cloud. And then virtualization of actual servers. So you didn't actually have to have a physical machine. You could have it virtualized. What you got was a virtual machine that was hosted in the cloud that you could access. You were still responsible for, you had admin privileges, but you were still responsible for running all of the updates, the virus scans that needed to be done, and any Windows updates that were part of that. The next level over is platform as a service, and that's really the sweet spot for any custom application development, because what you're doing is you're really looking at everything except for the application and the data, and offloading that to the vendor to provide you with scalable and resilient services that you can just say, hey, I want to deploy this website. So you're just thinking of it as the application of the data, the pieces that you're concerned about. You're not concerned about what's on the operating system. You're not concerned about having the latest updates and the latest virus protection. All that was managed by the vendor. And when you're working with Microsoft, that becomes something that they've invested thousands of dollars and continue to have an army of people that are sitting there managing these servers, making sure that everything's running the latest and greatest, and giving you feedback and information to how you can better improve the way your applications are deployed. The last area is software as a service, and many companies have a number of different software as a service offerings in their portfolio. This is typically what you would look at as something like Office 365, right? So being able to have your email, your SharePoint environment, anything like that, that you configure and it's ultimately run and hosted. You're not even really having to look at any of the application code or the data. It's all exposed publicly to you through a nice interface. The solution assessment that we're talking about today really focuses on that platform as a service, that sweet spot where if you do have custom application code that you're managing and maintaining, to get it to a place where it's cost efficient and running in a high performance manner. So Tallan has a similar approach to all of our projects. We focus with having a conversation with the customers and kind of partnering with you to understand what your vision is, where you currently are, what you've tried, what you're looking to do, and ultimately where you're looking to go. From that, with your input, we basically come up with a roadmap, and that includes comprehensive kind of pricing information to really kind of explain both the cost of what the cloud services deployment would look like, but also any remediation effort or any sort of additional development time that might be needed to get the applications to a place where they can be deployed. As well as kind of a timeline looking at the entire portfolio, trying to understand where the company is trying to go and what applications would be the right fit to do that. From there, if it's needed, we'll do a bit of a proof of concept if you're looking to test out an application or understand whether that whether it's performant enough, whether it's working the way it's expected, and whether it's secured in the manner that you're expecting. We can do a proof of concept based on your application or based on a reference architecture to show you what it would look like in the cloud and get your staff all ramped up on the technologies. From there, we start building it out, building out an MVP, showing you what that's like, and then going through the migration steps to get all the application codes, all the application code migrated and up into the cloud. And the last one is kind of operationalizing things and coming up with governance and hooking up any continuous integration, hooking up if you're using Azure DevOps to have your source control, having that kind of continuous integration process where when code gets checked in, it gets deployed to a proper environment. So kicking off this process from the application innovation perspective, we really start off with this App Innovate solution assessment, which is what we're talking about today. This is typically funded by Microsoft, at least co-funded by Microsoft, depending on the level of scale that you're looking to achieve there and how many applications you're looking to scan and assess. But that ultimately, focuses on the vision, where you guys are currently at and where you want to go, and then also that roadmap, putting together a plan based on some application scans and some data that we've looked at from your applications. Going from that, we also have an App in 30 offering. This is a nice little proof of concept application. There is potential for this to be funded by Microsoft, depending on, just depending on your company and what your needs are. Certainly would recommend talking to someone at Tallan, one of our BDMs, to help you figure out exactly kind of what funding may apply if you're interested in that. So looking at that App Innovate offering, we break it up into 3 different phases, all lasting about a week to 2 weeks. The first one is planning, and that's where we have some initial discovery conversations with you, focusing on where you're at with the cloud, what you've tried, what you're hoping to do, what you're looking at achieving. From there, we'll go into understanding some of the business objectives by it. Are you really looking at cost savings? Are you looking at some of the performance benefits and branching out into new businesses and new opportunities? And through that, we go through and do an assessment of all your applications. We also have an app modernization, which goes a little bit further back and does a full application portfolio analysis. So if you have a number of different custom solutions in your environment, that application modernization might be a good way to look at your entire portfolio. With this application innovation offering, what we're looking to do is really just identify 1 to 5 candidate applications. And those 1 to 5 candidate applications would ultimately, we would use those to run the scans on, understand any issues, and put those, provide a roadmap for a new architecture for those 1 to 5 applications that we've identified. The second phase is where we go through and really understand, what that architecture is going to look like. So we start off with some working sessions, going through those applications, reviewing the scan data that we have, that any information that was uncovered from that. We also look at any sort of Azure information, Azure pricing, and Azure details that you would need to host this. A lot of that comes down to sizing, sizing the applications right for your needs. One moment. Sorry, I'm also getting over a little cold, so I apologize. But what from those conversations, we're ultimately able to determine what a kind of 2B architecture might be for you. Again, we typically do platform as a service. but we've also, based on customers' needs, come up with container solutions and sort of hybrid solutions, hybrid cloud solutions, where different pieces of the application might run in the cloud and some could remain on-prem. We also work with you to establish a roadmap of what it would take to get those applications migrated over. And then finally focus on, giving you an understanding of how to set up the application from an Azure perspective and what additional pieces would also be needed to stand up these environments. Finally is reviewing the modernization plan with you. So we share all of our project deliverables. We prepare an executive presentation as demonstration of what we've presented and what we've gone over with the team. And then finally, we discuss the proposed course of action for each of the applications that we scanned. And usually we look at kind of a disposition for those types of applications. And when we scan them, determine whether these applications should be retired, replaced with something off the shelf potentially, just migrated over, potentially modernized and re-architected, or rebuilt from scratch and built something new that was needed for that. After that, the engagement concludes, and then we usually have a couple follow-on opportunities available. I mentioned the proof of concept, which is our app in 30. There's also other post-engagement options, as well as the full migration that we can propose in terms of next steps there. So looking at the deliverables, those line up with our initial first two steps. So from the vision perspective, we provide an executive summary as well as an as-is architecture assessment, looking at what you currently have, what's running on-prem, and how it works. There's a cloud adoption framework gap analysis, which is a bit of a survey tool that we sometimes offer that allows customers to see, where they're at from a maturity perspective. And then also any Azure consumption estimates that we have for moving to the cloud that could be offered to kind of look at what your current costs are and how those would translate. On the roadmap side, that's really where we provide the to-be architecture. I'm trying out this new feature with the overlay on the screen, but it looks like I'm covering up some of the slide here. We'll come up with a to-be architecture that's going to be a full design of your applications and what they would look like from a cloud platform as a service perspective. We also include with that any Microsoft recommended licensing or contracting terms. And then we'll go through an actual modernization plan for your applications, as well as any proposed additional services. So I mentioned that we run a couple scans. The one that you're seeing here is from our cloud pilot scan. And that provides two different things. One, it provides cost on the Azure side of what it would take to run this application in the cloud. The other piece that it provides is any static code analysis information and remediation efforts that would be required for moving it. What you see on this slide is a couple different mechanisms for how you would get charged for an application in the cloud. The easiest and cheapest is the pay-as-you-go option. You can also have a pay-as-you-go with Azure Hybrid benefit, which essentially allows you to keep your own licensing. And specifically when we're talking about SQL Server or other licensed products, you can save a lot of money just to have the Azure Hybrid benefit. From there, you have both a 1-year reserve instance and a 3-year reserved instance. Both of those typically come with Azure Hub or A Hub, which is your hybrid benefit. And they will reserve the server for you for that time and give you, an incremental percentage decrease if you even go up to even a 5-year reserve instance, which gets additional discounts on top of it. This next slide is the portfolio analysis from the Cloud Pilot tool. This tool is very nice, as I mentioned, for giving you kind of a readiness score of your application for its ability to move to the cloud. You can see here in the middle, we have our app service readiness, our container readiness, and virtual machine readiness. These are scores out of 100% that how many changes are needed for the application to either move to this app service, which is our platform as a service offering, or container readiness, which is more of a Docker instance, and then virtual machine readiness, which is our IaaS applications. So these readiness scores are based on static code analysis. With that code, they have a number of recommendations that are provided. So you see here for app services, there's 302 recommendations that are proposed for your application change. We call those your remediation estimates. Typically, those will have to do with how the applications run, whether you're accessing any sort of drive storage or any sort of physical paths. That is not something that's available in the cloud. So that's something that you're able to that you have to make code changes in order to support. And then there's also Windows authentication is another big one, and session storage. As that stuff starts to scale out your application, session storage is handled in a different way. All right. So let me pause here before we go into some of the case studies and see if there's any questions. I think I did see one come in.
And it looks like we do have a question from Jamie in the chat. It says, how does this compare to Power Apps?
Great. Yeah. So we do work with Power Apps at Tallan. We actually have Power Apps governance work that we usually kick off with customers around Power Apps for. And what that does is help customers install a thing called the Center of Excellence Toolkit, which is a set of tools as well as a Power BI report to ultimately look at what's going on within Power Apps and within your environment. The application innovation itself, if you have an older application that you're looking to migrate to the cloud and to a possible Power Apps environment, that certainly would be beneficial. But there is actually another offering from that has some co-funding from Microsoft called the App of the Future, which is another program where we've been working with recently. The App of the Future is for brand new envisioning of an application, and that certainly would apply for Power Apps. So it kind of depends, Jamie, if you're looking to take an existing application or if you're and modernize it, or if you are looking to, I'll say if it's an existing application in something like Excel or Access even, and modernizing it, certainly I think the plan would be to kind of rebuild something like that, and Power Apps would certainly be a contender for that. I will say those types of applications are not something that we can run the scan analysis on, the Excel formulas and some of the VB applications. So there is a certain point where, the scan tools are designed for more modern web-based applications. But if you have something that's desktop-based, we have used this program for it. It's just, you don't get as much benefit from the scan tools. All right. Any other questions before we get going?
That's all I see for now.
Okay. So I have 3 case studies I wanted to share with you guys today. The first one is the Connecticut Department of Public Health, or DPH. We worked with them on a direct-to-care or data-to-care surveillance program for HIV patients. Basically, they receive lab work from all over the state for patients that have tested positive for HIV. Sometimes these patients don't necessarily know that those lab results came back with that result. So they have a whole mechanism for going out and reaching out to patients that may have had this diagnosis and are not informed yet, so that they can try to stop the spread. Ultimately, the current process was manual paper forms. So they were taking manual forms and they were going ahead and moving them, manually typing them into a system. That system was then having to manually run on a batch mechanism and compare it with other data. And once it sat in one person's queue for, I think, around 20 days, it finally got moved into the data to care people's queue for them to start to address them. So it went from a process that was ultimately around 30 days from paperwork and sitting in various kind of manual queues to something that happened in less than a week with very minimal manual effort. So definitely a huge improvement there for how they were able to kind of take a slower manual paper-based process and optimize it, as well as, a lot of consolidation amongst other systems. So while they continued to improve and they didn't have that necessarily that paper system they still had some paperwork, but they had a hybrid where they had some paperwork as well as some automated FTP batch files, and then some information that was manually imported from the CDC. So you're taking information from multiple sources and kind of combining it together in that scenario. The next one is the Massachusetts legislator. We've worked with them for over 10 years, supporting a number of their modernization efforts. We primarily work with them in the legislative side on both their bill drafting and agenda management products. So when we talk about bill drafting, it's making amendments to any bills, any sort of changes or comments that happen on those amendments, and then ultimately putting them into an agenda that can be discussed as part on the House floor as part of an upcoming meeting that they may be having. That agenda management product is also something that they wanted to expose externally. So as we started to look at, taking any adjustments to those bills and pushing them out, and taking that and exposing the agenda so that people could see what was being talked about, there was a number of different areas there that we helped them improve. The last one I want to discuss here is a company called AMERSHER. We worked with them on an application innovation assessment, and we were able to kind of help them through an issue where they weren't able to migrate to the cloud because of an old Oracle database. Some of their applications were particularly chatty with that database too. And we were able to come up with a very nice kind of hybrid architecture for them, where we were able to focus on co-location of data and take their application, their application that was chatty with the Oracle database, and move that to a small piece of an API that remained on-prem, but allow the web application that's out in the cloud to communicate with that API. Just pull the one piece of aggregated information and then expose that out. So that is something that we think a lot about as the co-location of data. Where is data being stored? Where is data being retrieved? And in this scenario, we came up with a very nice architecture that allowed them to have that hybrid connectivity, take their applications and move them to the cloud. And because that VPN was set up, they also had a mechanism to be able to, keep their access constrained only to local employees within the company or within the network. Became a much more cost-effective and cheaper option for them to deploy. So how do we get started? So one mechanism is to go ahead and just contact me. Happy to take any calls or any kind of questions you may have. But Tallan, we also have a number of our BDMs that would be available to help you out. So if you want to reach out to me, I can get you in contact with the right people. Or if you're already working with someone at Tallan, feel free to reach out to them and they can help you navigate the different offerings that are available, as well as the different funding mechanisms that might be available for you as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap up. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. I apologize for my voice. I was feeling okay, but then of course, as I'm talking more, started to feel like I was getting choked up here.
Ben, I don't see anything in the chat, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask.
What do you guys think of the new video option here? Should we do this again or?
Yes.
All right. Great. Well, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your lunch hour to sit with us and listen to what we have to say about our solution assessment. I'd love to chat with you guys about anything that you guys have going on. We've been working with this technology for a long time and just enjoy talking about it and seeing what you guys have there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.